Have you ever found yourself completely locked in a debate where you have all the facts, you have the evidence, you clearly have the logical high ground, and yet somehow the more you prove your point, the more the other person digs their heels in? It's baffling, right? It's almost maddening. But it actually points to this fascinating psychological blind spot in how we communicate with each other. Seriously, think about it. Have you ever proved someone was wrong? Maybe it's a partner about how to load the dishwasher, or a family member at the dinner table, or even a coworker who totally messed up a spreadsheet. And somehow, instead of thanking you for the correction, they became even more defensive. You literally present the perfect argument, and their reaction is to just get angry. Okay, let's dive into this, because what's actually happening beneath the surface here is completely invisible. The exact moment someone is corrected, the argument instantly stops being about facts. Right then and there, it turns into an emotional defense. Suddenly, they feel controlled, they feel embarrassed, they feel intellectually threatened, or even worse, they feel like their very identity is being attacked. The data, the spreadsheet, the chore, none of that matters anymore. They're in pure survival mode. Which brings us to a really curious question, and honestly one of the great everyday mysteries of human behavior. Why does proving you're right sometimes make people like you less? Why does winning the battle of logic so often mean losing the relationship or losing the actual outcome you wanted in the first place? Well, the answer lies in a concept first proposed by psychologist Jack Brem back in 1966. It's called psychological reactance. Put very simply, nobody likes feeling controlled. Nobody likes being told what they should think or what they should do. When a person senses that you are trying to force a conclusion on them, their brain immediately registers it as a threat to their freedom. They will resist you simply because they want to feel free to decide for themselves. Modern research calls this an intertwined model, but here is how it actually plays out in real time. Step 1, you make a forceful point, which triggers that threat to their freedom. Step 2, they have an affective anger response, which is really just a fancy way of saying they get annoyed and defensive. And then step 3, cognitive counter-arguing. Their brain automatically goes into overdrive, inventing reasons why you are wrong, just to protect their autonomy. You might be making perfect sense, but their brain is literally manufacturing counter-arguments just to keep you from winning. And this brings us to a really profound realization. Sometimes you're not defending an opinion anymore. You're defending yourself. People don't always resist the truth. They resist the person making them feel wrong. Because think about it, to accept your argument means accepting defeat. It means submitting to your intellect and giving up their own autonomy. And the research on persuasion backs this up beautifully. When we look at why people resist being persuaded, we see 3 hidden motives. There's that threat to freedom we just talked about, but there's also a deep reluctance to change, especially if an attitude is tied to their personal identity. And finally, there are concerns of deception. People simply don't want to feel fooled or manipulated. So what do? They automatically put up their shields just to protect their pre-existing beliefs from your outside influence. But here is where everything shifts. What if you didn't have to convince them? What if you could bypass those invisible psychological barriers, the anger, the counter-arguing, the ego defense entirely? Just imagine if you could get someone to see they were wrong without ever triggering their psychological reactance. The solution to this is the immense power of showing instead of telling. An argument inherently says, believe me, yield to my logic. It demands compliance. But evidence, demonstration, action, that simply says, look, it is completely non-threatening. You aren't forcing a belief onto them. You are just presenting reality and letting them observe it. This taps into what psychologists call the power of self-generated conclusions. When people observe reality and connect the dots in their own minds, they reach conclusions completely on their own. And when that happens, the defensive wall just vanishes. They don't feel controlled because they did the thinking. They don't feel embarrassed because they solved the puzzle themselves. Now, this isn't just some modern psychological breakthrough. If we look back, we find the perfect historical documentation of this exact psychological pattern. Throughout history, the most persuasive individuals didn't win by out-debating their opponents. They understood human nature way too well for that. In fact, author Robert Greene observed this human tendency across thousands of years of history, and he codified it as Law 9 in his famous book, The 48 Laws of Power. The law simply states, win through your actions, never through argument. Greene saw exactly what the psychologist found. Arguing triggers resistance. It stirs up pride and defensiveness. But action? Action bypasses the ego entirely. Think about the ironic twist here. Desperation breeds defensiveness. The more desperately you try to prove you're right, the more you raise your voice and stack your evidence and try to corner them with logic, the more the other person feels they absolutely must defend their freedom to disagree. By trying so hard to win, you are actually guaranteeing their resistance.
So the ultimate goal isn't making someone look you in the eye and admit you're right. It's letting reality make the argument for you. When you step back and simply demonstrate the truth through action, you strip away the interpersonal conflict. It's no longer you versus them. It is simply them observing the undeniable reality of the situation.
And this leaves us with a truly profound thought about human memory and the fragile human ego. When you aggressively argue and force someone to admit you're right, they might yield, sure, but they will remember the humiliation. They will resent you for it. But when you create a situation where you let them discover the truth for themselves, they remember the insight. And way more importantly, they get to keep their dignity. So the next time you're desperate to prove you're right, just stop and ask yourself, do I want to win the argument, or do I want to change what happens next? If you want to understand the hidden psychology behind everyday human behavior, subscribe to Beyond the Pages. We use the ideas hidden in great books to uncover why people behave the way they do. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.